Citizens, guests, staff, and council, good evening. This is the regular meeting of the City Council of December 3, 2013. City Clerk, please take the roll.
Mayor Cernanik.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Beckman.
Here.
Councilmember Brinkman.
Here.
Councilmember Cole.
Here.
Councilmember Stallman.
Here.
Councilmember Stein.
Here.
Councilmember Valdez.
Present.
And tonight we will have the Pledge of Allegiance led by the Scout Troop number 456. They are situated at the Franklin Elementary School.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Scott. Are there any changes that anyone at Council would like to discuss for this evening to the agenda?
I have a comment. There are a couple items that I want to bring up about the agenda order that has to do with the council comments and things that I want the council to really consider maybe for January or something, that we move the council comments to beginning so that the folks at the meeting as well as watchers on TV can hear some of the stuff that council members are announcing. So if you will, council, if you keep that in mind, if we can rearrange the agenda at some point.
And Jerry, for that particular item, can we include it in our protocols and procedures review that we're going to have on the 16th?
Be a perfect place for it.
Okay, great.
That's the 16th of December, right?
Yep.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Anything else?
Yeah, I'd like to add an item for general business. Discussing videoing of the remaining charter review committee meetings.
Okay, we'll add that as item 8B. Anything else? Okay, thank you. And we'll begin the evening. Next item is the citizen appearances, and we have the guest citizens. These are the 2014 Littleton Calendar and Annual Report Photography Contest winners, and you'll have the opportunity after the reading of the information and then your name. You'll come forth, and Mayor Pro Tem Beckman will be taking care of the reading.
Good evening. This evening, the Littleton City Council is pleased to recognize the winners of the 2014 Littleton Calendar and Annual Report Photography Contest. 6 members of the Littleton Fine Arts Committee selected the winners from 240 prints submitted by 66 entrants. The popular calendar is now available at the Littleton City Center, the Bemis Library, the Littleton Museum, Town Hall Arts Center, and from the calendar's generous sponsors. The major sponsors are Colorado Business Bank, Chase Bank, Bradford Auto Body Incorporated, Western Welcome Week, Life Care Center of Littleton, GDM Management Incorporated, McDonald's, Rely Local Citizen, Steinley Realty Services Incorporated, Littleton Adventist Hospital, PDA Road Gear, Stu Maher Commonwealth Realty Services, and Aspen Grove Lifestyle Center. Additional sponsors are Lautenbach Insurance Agency, LLC, Henry's Jewelry Company, Incorporated, and Monty Nuss Photography. And the winners. The winners are, and when I announce your name, would you please come down, and then we'll get everyone down for the presentation. January, David Lindner. February, Shirley Bannister. March, Paul Lindberg. April, Linda Olson. May, Connie Nielsen. June Catherine Mullen. July Steve Harbula. August Jerry Donovan. September John Burks. October Scott Latona.
Yeah.
November Candace Herman. December Carol Rudd. And on the cover, William Wiebesek. The Littleton City Council congratulates the 2014 calendar winners for their skill in capturing the beauty of the city. And I believe there's calendars up in the rear of the room, and each of the winners should pick up 10 calendars to give to their friends. Because their pictures are in it.
Cool.
Now, Chief Mullen and entourage, please come down for the presentation of the Cernich Award.
If I could have Ms. Devers come forward and the neighbors of hers.
People.
Who did what? Who saved whom?
Pete, would you like me to read the award, or with John, were you going to read the award?
I believe that the best mark of a good community is how we take care of one another. And I believe that Ms. Devers did that with her actions. John P. Cernich, Sr., was a captain with Littleton Fire Rescue. He was an innovator. He was a contributor. He was instrumental in bringing life safety equipment into Littleton. He was a vanguard of life safety here in Littleton. He brought many, many innovations. But the best thing that he probably brought, two of the best things, one was the spirit of community. The second that he brought to the city was his son, John P. Cernich, Jr., who's with us tonight. It was in John P. Cernich Sr.'s name that we created this memorial award to be given to citizens who come forward and through their efforts, a life is saved. We are very pleased tonight to recognize such a person that came forward in our community. Louise Devers, a mail carrier for the United States Postal Service. Last summer, Louise noticed that a neighbor had not picked up her mail for 3 days. The neighbor is an elderly gentleman, lives alone, and is not in good health. Being concerned, Louise knocked on the door of Mr. Badia, who lives across the street. Mr. Badia also became alarmed. They looked through the window. They found nothing. They looked for a key. Of course, the neighbor had a key. They noticed that the man was down, and at that time the neighbors gathered together and called 911, which is just what they should do. The police, the fire department arrived. They were able to transport this patient to local hospital where he was saved. I'd like to take full credit as fire chief for saving that life, but of course I can't. Great troops intervened that were able to save this life, but it all started, ladies and gentlemen, with the actions of one of our good citizens, a mail carrier, Louise Devers. So with that, we would certainly like to award Ms. Devers, and when I say we, I mean the community, I mean her neighbors who came forward to nominate her. In fact, I believe she is an honorary member of your Neighborhood Watch. Is that true? What a great program. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to have Pete Cernich Jr. award the John P. Cernich Memorial Award to Louise Devers. Pete Cernich.
I'm honored to receive this award and that I was able to help that gentleman and that people cared enough to come here tonight. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Louise.
Also, ladies and gentlemen, just for your information, we are having cookies in the next room, a little reception for Louise. So thanks again. Well done.
Yeah.
Mail lady, too.
Nice.
I think. She's got a cousin.
Yeah. You see that?
We now also have the time for unscheduled public appearances. This is an opportunity for any citizen to express opinions or ask questions regarding city services, council policies, or other matters of community concern that are not part of the scheduled agenda. Generally, an immediate response should not be expected, and typically issues are referred to city staff for follow-up information or research and reported back to the council and the individual that initiated the comment or the inquiry. Would anyone like to step forward? Paul?
Paul Bingham, 236 West Delaware Circle. Good evening, Mayor Cernanik and Council. Two things. Number one, I would like to wish you all good luck as you proceed on your perilous journey as our newly reconstituted City Council. And number two, I'd like to request that the Charter Council Committee meetings be videoed also, as Peggy requested. That's a very historic document we're modifying, and it needs to be recorded. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Anyone else? Yes. Carol?
Carol Breezak, live in the 4th District. I would like for some clarification to be made about the Charter Review Committee meeting tomorrow. It's showing up on the website as being at the museum, and it's also showing up being in the community room next door at 3 o'clock. So for my purposes, I would like to know, I think from the last meeting, they said they were going to meet here, but I would like to know for sure.
It's at the community, in the community room.
Thank you, community room. And I would like to voice my support for the videotaping of the meetings. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. We'll now move to the consent agenda items. Consent agenda items can be adopted by a single simple motion. All ordinances must be read by title prior to a vote on the motion, and any consent agenda item may be removed at the request of a council member. We have two consent agenda items for consideration. Item 6A is a resolution of the City Council of the City of Littleton, Colorado, to transfer funds from the General Fund to the Capital Projects Fund. This is an annual element that we've done to allow for the 17% reserve requirement and to have the excess then transferred to hold on to some integrity with regard to general fund considerations as we look at every annual period. Item 6B is a resolution of the City Council of the City of Littleton, Colorado, as the governing body of the City of Littleton. It's for an emergency medical transportation enterprise amending the 2013 budget. This allows for an excess expenditure of approximately $750,000 as a gross amount. The impact to the city's general fund on this is about $225,000. Entertain a motion.
Move to approve consent agenda items 6A and 6B.
Second.
Okay, Council, for those new to the table, up is yes, down is no.
The vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries.
Thank you. Thank you. Now we have second reading, which also provides for public comment. The first of these is with regard to an ordinance number 25, series of 2012, known as the Annual Appropriation Bill for all municipal purposes for the fiscal year beginning January 1, 2013 and ending December 31, 2013. Chief Financial Officer Doug.
Thank you and good evening. There are two fire-related additional expenditure appropriation requests in the general fund and two requests for fund transfers from the general fund to the capital projects fund. The additional funds requested related to the fire department. One of them is a request for $318,000 per the West Metro Fire District contract that was approved by council earlier this year. That's to provide trail mark fire services. And the net outlay to the city after the fire contract reimbursements is $185,000. And the other fire appropriation is $425,000 for overtime costs. And the net city cost will be $127,500 after the fire contract reimbursements. There are two transfers from the general fund to the capital projects fund, and we kind of separated those out. One is a carryover $500,000 that was left to be appropriated from 2012. The city could only transfer up to the legal appropriation amount, and there was $500,000 left over to bring the general fund reserve down to the 17% level per policy. So that's why we broke those up. We have $500,000 and then another $950,000 that we're proposing for the 2013 net revenues that's projected in the general fund. Those excess revenues would be transferred to the capital projects fund as well. And we would assume the same process is if there are any excess revenues beyond that that we need to transfer, we will come to council in 2014 for a budget amendment to do that interfund transfer. I have one graphic I just wanted to show regarding the general fund.
Have it face you, Doug.
Working on it.
You gotta snap your fingers.
He's working on it.
While we're waiting, any good accounting jokes?
It'll be fixed by the end of the month.
I don't have any good finance jokes. I don't like to make jokes.
I was going to say that it is a finance graph, so it's not overly gripping. So if we can't get it, we're probably okay.
While we are waiting, though, I would like to ask if there are any questions about the other funds that are outlined for the budget amendment tonight. We have a couple of other funds from the first reading. Public Facilities Fund of $20,000. The Consolidated Special Revenue Fund of $320,000 for wildland fires, and Consolidated Special Revenue for $25,000 for Littleton Fine Arts purchase, and grants fund of $110,600, which are going to be reimbursable by grant revenues.
Okay. We do have some questions. First, Councilman Valdez.
Hey, Doug. Hey, on the second item, the $425,000. And this is related, my question is really related to the injuries and the overtime. Is any of this in relationship to the wildfire fighters? We've been sending our guys off to go do work, and you got the overhead now.
It is not. We actually account for that in the grants fund, but we do get fully reimbursed. All the deployments that go out, all the fire personnel costs, all the supplies costs are fully reimbursable with the intergovernmental agreements that we have for the wildland fires. And then when those personnel are out in deployment, we actually get the backfill when we have to bring other personnel to backfill for those employees. We get the overtime costs or straight salary reimbursements as well.
I would add, if I may, that relative to workers' comp claims, we do not see an increase because of that, both with the people that are deployed and those that are backfilling in terms of working extra hours. That was one of the things we looked into and questioned within the
So when overtime is calculated, then it does not include the overtime that occurs because of some of our firefighters are off fighting fires somewhere else. We have guys that stay home and women are working overtime. So does that time that they're working the overtime count? I know it gets reimbursed, you said. That's cool. But is that a part of the calculations that we have in some of this other funding?
It's part of the other fund costs, that's correct, but it is not part of the general fund costs, not part of the $425,000 that we're asking for the council appropriation for the general fund.
And then as far as the injuries and the overtime, do we have a plan or anything in place to remedy the injuries or the overtime, excessive overtime?
Yes, we're looking at that all the time, and you know, 2013 was definitely a high year. There were more injuries than normal, on the job and off the job injuries, which leads us to the workers' comp more in the claims area there that we're asking for that appropriation tonight. We're looking at different scheduling in the fire department. We're looking at different ways to get the injured personnel back into the field. We've asked council for the additional personnel, and I think that in 2014 there will be 3 more additional personnel, which will cut down on the overtime and also on the burnout that could happen if these people are working too many hours. So we're definitely looking at a lot of different perspectives and ways and methods to cut down on those overtime costs.
So there was over $700,000 in overtime?
Actually, there was over $1.1 million above budget for 2013. When you look at the Emergency Medical Transportation Fund and also the General Fund, those are the 2 main overtime departmental categories for the fire department. So it was quite a bit of money. We originally thought in the 2013 budget that we'd get that we'd hire the full-time personnel faster and get those people out in the field faster, and that did not happen. And so that's contributed to the overtime in 2013, along with the injuries. It just kind of accumulated from then on.
So when someone is injured, say fighting the wildfires, does it require overtime then for people to backfill then for that time? While they're out recovering?
And then being deployed to the fires?
An individual who is deployed and is injured on deployment, they're being backfilled at home by someone doing overtime.
Right.
And now that we're going to be short that individual because they're recovering, and someone else is working overtime. Is that overtime that we're getting reimbursed for?
We probably have to ask the fire chief about that because that's pretty specific to the personnel and the scheduling. I don't know.
He's not here. We have.
Do you know? I know Tiffany is in charge of that grant.
We have not had that circumstance.
Okay.
At least not in.
It's not an issue.
Not an issue for 2013.
Okay. Then I just have one more question, or 2 more questions, if I may. So on the, let's see, going down to the Geneva Fund, $20,000. It says $20,000 for unforeseen maintenance and repairs. Now, South Metro Options manages the property, right?
That's correct.
So this $20,000 is not paid out of the operating funds by Geneva Village?
This is coming out. We have an enterprise fund for the Geneva Village where all the rental payments are deposited into and accumulated. And so we do budget for utilities, operating maintenance, some small capital improvements for the building, replacing carpet and those type of things.
Normal stuff.
So this is what has come up throughout the years, unforeseen repairs and those maintenance type of items that were not anticipated.
And what are the unforeseen repairs?
I don't know specifically what those repair costs were for. They usually budget for a small amount of small items to be repaired, but this was a little bit larger than normal.
Yeah, yeah, it's not a killer, but it's just kind of.
Asbestos abatement.
Asbestos.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So on my last question then, under the employee insurance fund, and here it mentions that there were a few more claims this year than in past years. We also have the employee wellness program. Now, is the wellness program helping out at all? I mean, if we're having more people sick or, insurance rates going up, we added money for the employee wellness program.
I'll jump in again on this one. So yes, I mean, we have multiple things. We have the wellness program, which we've had for, I think, 3 or 4 years now. And that has certainly made a difference in our usage and the employees' responsibility relative to staying healthy and being healthy. We have the clinic in place, which we're going to have a study session on, I think, next week, actually, and get an update on. It's had an issue. What we're seeing is we have, as we continue to age and our employee demographics are starting to look at retirement, we're seeing more people come in prior to retirement with the unknown of what the future insurance holds, and some of those claims are happening. So people are having knee replacements, people are having hip replacements, and obviously the natural
back injuries.
Back injuries, exactly. Thank you very much. That occur, but we're seeing people who are saying, I'm going to retire in the next year or two, and what we anticipate is probably over the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to see a significant increase in that. And so one of the things for 2014 that we're looking at is how we start to address that and manage that so we keep our insurance costs manageable.
So part of the wellness program, they can go work out, so that means they wear their knee out, and then they eventually have to get it replaced.
No, it's more about how do you honor insurance, but not because we're self-insured, we have for the ability, for example, to limit or change the percentage share on spouse and children as opposed to the employee, and maybe look at limiting what is allowed as you start to get closer to retirement and different things, because we are very concerned about those next 5 to 10 years as people enter into an unknown insurance world.
That's good information. Thanks. I appreciate it.
You bet.
Thank you.
Councilmember Spellman.
Doug, we had some communication on this in advance, but I'm still a bit confused, so I'll beg your pardon in advance.
Oh, no problem. No problem.
On 6A, we just approved, did we just approve a $950,000, the current estimate is $950,000 in terms of the transfer from the general fund to the capital projects fund. That's, I mean, I think the resolution language doesn't stipulate the dollar amount, but you guys are estimating $950.
Yes, and that gives staff the flexibility to transfer the actual amount to bring it down to the reserve level in the general fund, and that's why there's no specific dollar amount as far as the resolution.
Correct. So on 7A, the fourth item down talks about specifically transferring $950 from the general fund to the capital projects fund in accordance with the 17% level that we've all agreed upon. Those are the same things, right? So on the one, we were just doing it generally, and now we're specifically saying it's $950.
Yes, and what this does is grant the appropriation to be $950,000. Now, the actual amount might only be $700,000. We won't know until May of next year when the audit is complete, and we know the exact amount of fund balance that's left over in the general fund, and then we'll make that transfer amount. So it's all the way up to the $950,000 appropriation amount, and that's why it's open-ended in the resolution.
Okay, so just in the way you described that, I want, for my own edification, I just want to make sure 6A and 7A there was no inconsistency, I guess, is the best way to say it.
They go hand in hand. You're absolutely right.
Okay, thank you.
So let me make sure that I'm understanding that. So 6A is saying, hey, this is how much we're going to transfer, but the 7A is the actual ability to spend it, to appropriate it, right?
The other way around.
That's
Or
right.
did I turn it around?
Yeah,
That's right.
No, he says I'm right.
okay. It's
Yeah.
all.
Councilmember Brinkman?
On the wildfire fund, I recall that, I think it was either last year or the year before, that it was taking quite some time to get that money in. Do you have any idea? It still is?
There's still a big lag period. You're
Okay.
absolutely right. So we still don't know the exact amounts. And you're right, there will be a receivable at the end of this year. So we will receive that probably in the first quarter next year for the 2013 fires.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Beckman?
Just a couple questions. The increase in personal injuries and equipment and those kinds of things. In the past, we had a safety committee. Is that still an active part of city operations? I know they were tasked always to look at each one of these losses and see if there was a supervisory issue or some kind of policy issue or failing of, a piece of equipment.
I think there is still a committee now. I'm not sure how active they've been. And I'm not sure about how periodically that they meet.
Yes. Yes and yes.
Okay.
The suggestion being that these numbers just don't go by. They're looked at by the supervisory and management staff each time they occur and then in review.
That occurs every time.
Yes. And then the other question is in regards to the grants fund. These are just the unanticipated grants, or is this the sum total of grants that the city receives?
This is the total that we've received. So we're asking for the appropriation amount so we can spend the money, and then we will be fully reimbursed from grant revenues.
Because this does reflect an area that we talked about at that study session then.
Yes, correct. And then I think one of the things, and Doug, correct me if I'm wrong, is for 2014, we asked the council and we discussed it during the budget meetings to appropriate the full amount. And then there was a couple examples, I don't remember what they were right now, where if we didn't get the grant, we would come back to council prior to expenditure. But that would preclude us having to come back a year from now and ask for additional appropriation getting the grant. So we switched it and took more of the positive approach to say we're going to get the grant, appropriate the full project cost. If we don't get it, we'll come and talk to you and make sure that you're still comfortable spending it out of our funds minus the grant dollars. But yes, this will move up that line, if you will.
Great. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. There's an opportunity for public comment. No one has signed up on the roster. Would anyone care to come down? Seeing no one. This again is an ordinance of the City of Littleton, Colorado, amending ordinance number 25, series of 2012, known as the Annual Appropriation Bill, for all municipal purposes of the City of Littleton, counties of Arapahoe, Jefferson, and Douglas, State of Colorado, for the fiscal year beginning January 1, 2013, and ending December 31, 2013. Discussion?
Mayor, can you please close the public hearing?
Oh. Close the public hearing.
Thank
It's
you.
closed. Thank you.
Do you need a motion? Going to get a motion?
We can use one? Yes.
Okay. I move that the ordinance amending ordinance number 25, series of 2012, known as the Annual Appropriations Bill for all municipal purposes for the fiscal year and beginning January 1st, 2013 and ending December 31st, 2013 be approved on second reading.
Second.
Council, again,
Discussion.
opportunity to vote.
No discussion?
Oh, any additional discussion?
Nope.
Okay.
The vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries.
Thank you.
And Mayor, Charlie Blosson will present this next one.
Thank you. This is Agenda Item 7B, an ordinance approving an access easement between the City of Littleton and LCP 2009 LLC.
Good evening, Council. Tonight you have before you an ordinance on second reading that would allow an easement to be granted by the city to the adjacent property owner just to the east of the municipal courthouse on Littleton Boulevard and Court Place. That building, which was formerly known as the Sternberg Building, and the courthouse share an access from their parking lots to westbound Littleton Boulevard. The easement that is being requested tonight is the portion in yellow. And as you can see with the red lines, that would be the driveway that would come out of the parking lots and go to westbound Littleton Boulevard. The easement is necessary so that the property owner to the east has legal right to use that property for access, such as we have already been doing for the last number of years. This formalizes that position. With that simple explanation, Council, if you have any questions, I'll be glad to respond.
Councilmember Stein.
Hi, Charlie. Good to see you. I have a question, and I apologize. It may be a little nitpicky, but on my page 17, I don't know if you're referring to the same pages as we have in our packet with the ordinance. It talks about, I'll just read it. It's one sentence. It says, LCP 2009 LLC is the owner of approximately 1.29 acres of real property. Yet on several, it's otherwise referenced, and this may be my mistake, on pages 17, 23, and 24 as just 0.29 acres. And I'm just wondering if I misread that.
Where was the one, Councilmember?
The very first one?
Yeah.
So the third whereas from the top on the first page.
Oh, understand.
It references 1.29 acres there, and then if you scroll down to pages 23 and 24.
It appears like it should be a point based on the parcel that we have up on the screen, because it says 0.275 plus or minus up there. Charlie, does that sound right? So the whereas clause should be amended to say 0.29 acres.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So we'll make that correct. We'll make that
correction before it's executed by the mayor.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Okay. Any additional questions? No. Councilmember Valdez.
Charlie, why did the city hang on to that little sliver right there?
Councilman, that I cannot tell you. It was done a number of years ago, and between Michael and myself, we kind of walked into this without that history. I can't tell you.
I mean, it was discovered because, someone was, when they were doing I think you said the Alta survey, but there's something under there that the city needs to have control of, or is there?
Well, the city owned both the Sternberg building and the courthouse, and the driveways served both buildings. And my only guess is that years ago when we did the survey and sold the Sternberg building, there might have been an error made in how that legal description was calculated. That's the only explanation I could come up with.
And I have one other question, too, if I may, and this is for our city attorney. On Section 2, starting at line 40, where it says, City Council hereby declares that, and so on and so forth, if there's any errors. Do you see where I'm looking at, line 40? Mm-hmm. Okay. Where it says that we would pass this ordinance, including each part, section, subsection, sentence, clause, therefore, irrespective of the fact that one or more of the parts of the sections of the clause or phrases may be declared invalid. I mean, how do we know that?
Councilmember Valdez, you don't know that, but this is standard boilerplate language that is in almost any real estate contract. It's actually in a whole lot of other kinds of commercial contracts as well. Basically, there's a rule of law that says if a piece of a document is ruled by a court to be inappropriate, the court can, unless there's an express statement made by the parties to the contrary, declare the entire document to be invalid. So it's become standard practice and boilerplate language in most contracts to put in these severability clauses that basically say if a piece of this is deemed by a court to be invalid, we'd want to keep the rest of it. In the case where we would have a contract where even one small piece would cause the city to say we never would have done that deal but for any of the small little pieces that make up this entire contract, we would not put this kind of language in. But this is not the kind of situation where we could envision that there would be a section of this that a court theoretically would rule invalid that we wouldn't have wanted the court to preserve the rest of what we're trying to accomplish.
Well, I recognize it as standard language. I guess the part that I found interesting, it says the city council hereby declares.
Well, it's the city council who's making the action to, to deal with this easement because the charter requires council action on these kinds of transactions. So it just makes sense to say council's doing this now, and it's the council saying if any part of it is severed by a court, we would continue with the rest of the agreement.
Thank you.
Okay. Seeing no other questions, we'll open the public comment. There's no one on the roster. Would anyone choose to come down and comment? Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing and look for discussion among council as well as a motion.
I move the ordinance approving an access easement between the city and LCP 2009 LLC be approved on second reading.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll take it that the council is ready to vote. And up is yes.
Didn't change. And down is
no.
The vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries.
Thank you.
I don't want to get ripping here.
Now we move to general business item 8A, which is the Meadows at Platte Valley subdivision. Welcome, Director Van Nimwegen.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. You probably remember that back on August 20th of 2013, Council approved the rezoning, which changed the designation of 13 acres of a 16-acre commercial site to planned development residential. That would allow 250 apartments, and at the time, the applicant showed 3 acres of retail remaining, and that's still the case today. What you have before you is a minor subdivision plat, and the reason it's a minor plat means a couple of things. One is that they do not have to go through a preliminary plat stage where you get a approval from the planning board, and that's because it is 10 or fewer lots, and all the parcels front on a public street. The plat that's before you is roughly 3 acres. It is 3 acres, or 3 different lots. And you do note that that's a little bit different than what the PDR showed, which showed the commercial site potentially being 3 different parcels. What the applicant has done is combine 2 of those parcels, and they're going to do, I believe, an inline retail building across those 2 lots. However, the condition that was placed on the zoning, and I'll just read it here, still remains in effect, and that is the commercial area must be 2/3 constructed prior to the issuance of the 150th certificate of occupancy for the residential portion of the project or the apartments. Also, we're asking for your approval of the subdivision improvement agreement. Basically, the SIA is to assure that the public improvements get done, and so what you see in there is laid out potential costs of those public improvements and how that improvement is financial assurance is being provided and how it's going to be warranted. We also have an inclusion of the credit for construction of Mineral Avenue, which was done back, I think, in 1986, 87, the later part of the 1980s. So we are proposing a credit for their impact fees for that improvement. So with that, staff is recommending approval of the final plat and the subdivision improvement agreement for the Meadows at Platte Valley, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, and I'll remind council that the primary policy questions before us are for the monument, city monument creation, and the second piece is a transportation impact fee component waiver, in part due to the historic element of this property and its annexation and going back into that. Are there other questions by council?
So if I understand correctly, the commercial piece with the 150th residential unit connected, that's not in the agreement. That's in the zoning, but not in the agreement?
That's correct.
Okay, and I'm going to be asking, when we finish discussion, to amend, when we have a motion, to put it in the actual agreement. It's a minor thing in one way, but I think it's good.
Councilmember Spellman?
Well, to Councilmember Cole's question, if it's in the zoning, does it need to be in the agreement?
To a certain extent, it's redundant. I think staff's talked about it. I don't think we have an issue of repeating it in the SIA. I guess it just adds a little bit more clarity, but certainly the ordinance is the ruling document, so that's what we're bound to follow.
I did have conversation with our deputy city attorney, and she said that that's what she had recommended, and so because I was asking about it, and she said that's what she had recommended. So I'm assuming there's not a good reason to not do what she would recommend, so.
I think they like being redundant.
It's duplicative of what's in there. The legal following is going to be the ordinance, which has the condition in it. But it's up to council when you get to that.
Mayor Pro Tem Beckman?
This may be the simplest question of all tonight. The $25,000 for the city monument, has the consideration been given to what that standard is going to be, and if it's going to be, I mean, this may be the step that takes us down the next road of standardized monuments in other places in the city based on what is decided on this one. And I'm asking what kind of thought process has been given to this already?
We actually already have a standard because we're replacing the one on our property here, and so that's what will be carried over for that.
Okay, thank you.
And it's been routed through, and I don't have a drawing of it, but
because it would be my desire to begin to memorialize those in other places.
Yes,
where so people know they're entering the city.
There's a plan to replace and add, and it's coming through the communications department.
Thank you.
Councilmember Cole?
So in the calculation of impact fees with the study that was done, were things like those memorial monuments included in the calculation of that? I'm not remembering something like that.
No, I don't think down to that detail. I mean, it's a very small part of the total capital improvements of building streets, so I don't think they have a separate line item for when we did the impact fee study you're talking about. Yeah, I really don't think they included a cost of an entry monument into the city.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Council discussion? Entertain a motion?
I move that the final subdivision plat and subdivision improvement agreement for Meadows at Platte Valley, final subdivision plat, be approved.
Second.
Any discussion? Councilmember Cole?
I would like to amend to have the zoning piece that I mentioned earlier be included in the agreement itself, with the related to when the business.
And Mayor, for purpose of the motion and the council discussion, what we would do is just take the language directly out of the ordinance relative to the two-thirds constructed prior to the 150th building permit. So just so everyone understands, that's what we would take for purposes of the motion.
Okay.
Is that your motion, Peg? I'll second it.
Motion and a second. Discussion. Okay. There's a motion. Oh, Councilmember Stallman.
I guess, I mean, I'm hearing two things. If the deputy city attorney is saying she's recommending, city manager is saying it's more or less redundant, City Attorney Feldman, I mean, what's your take on this, if you please?
This is not a life or death issue. When she said she recommended it, I think what she was referring to was she took the first crack at drafting this agreement, and she included it in her first draft. After discussion with the property owner, it was recommended, do we need that in here? Can we take it out? It's already in the ordinance. It's a binding commitment, and we talked about it, and we said, sure. So it was basically a request of the other party. If council wants to put it in there, we're fine putting it in there. It doesn't change legally what the obligations and the rights of the parties are. It's simply a preference for you. I think Kristen would tell you if she were here tonight, it's not a case of she recommended it because she felt like it was critical that it needed to be in this document. She just thought it made sense to put it in there, and then upon request to take it out, we looked at it and we said, sure, didn't seem like a problem.
Well, so I wish you were here tonight, because when I talked to her about 4 or 4:30 somewhere this afternoon, she would prefer to have it in, but it's not critical, and she did say that. But she saw that kind of redundancy doesn't hurt anything, and can potentially avoid some slip-ups as technology and changes and people change and whatever. So.
Sure, and just again, so the council's clear, and I really don't, I'm sure that when we have discussions one-on-one, we take different things away from them, and I don't want to put Kristen in the middle. She did give Michael and Glenn and I a heads up after she spoke to you, Councilmember Cole, and she basically said she talked to you, she gave us a heads up that you were going to likely ask that we put this back in, and what she told us was that she told Councilmember Cole that it was initially put in there, and that there's no harm in adding it as a safety net, no downside to including it or not including it. So I completely understand that you may have taken away something a little bit stronger from that conversation. I just want to make sure that at the end of the day, the legal advice coming from the city attorney's office is it's fine to put it in, it's fine to leave it out. The city has certain rights as a result of the original approval, and those rights will not be affected whether we go one way or the other.
And Mayor, if I may, I was part of those discussions and negotiations and felt like the duplicating it here was not necessary, and at the request of the developer owner, taking it out was acceptable, especially checking with building department and community development where we can put conditions under the project to ensure that it will not allow us, if we all suddenly disappear, to do it. We've spent much more time probably than is an issue. This is a strict policy question. Do you want to have it in two places or one? The ordinance will be the guiding document, but you can vote either way. We will put it in or not.
Okay. We have the amendment to the original motion on the table. Council ready to vote?
Sure.
The vote is 3 in favor with Councilmember Stallman, Mayor Cernanik, and Councilmember Brinkman, Councilmember Stein voting no. The motion fails.
Thank you. We're back to the main motion.
And I have a question. Good. What is the net effect here? So we have this commercial space and residential space has all been rezoned. That's good. Dollar-wise, what is the net effect here? We're just taking money that the developer has paid out and we're reducing.
So the council approved an impact fee ordinance, which has, for commercial, there's a certain rate, and for residential, there's a certain rate. And so if we use estimates for the residential side, they would write a check to us for about $940,000. What we're proposing is that the credit of, so that's based upon 250 units being built. We don't exactly know how many units will be built, but for purposes of the discussion, let's say 250 units, $940,000 would be the check written to us. We're proposing that the developer get the $25,000 credit for building a monument sign, primarily because it doesn't have a development benefit. It has a community benefit. So that knocks off $25,000 from that $940, and then
that one's easy.
Approximately $75,000 is reduced because we're proposing that we not charge for the transportation impact fee on the total number of units of that 250 units. The rationale for that is, so that's the difference. So to answer your question, it's about $105,000 from the 940 down. So you're looking at 835 in rough numbers.
So the transportation impact fee pays for what?
For street capacity enlargement. So future street capacity.
So where we're supposed to go with right now is that because it's not going to be as much commercial, there's going to be less damage to the streets and sidewalks.
Yeah, well, this one's a unique character because we're dealing with an annexation agreement from almost 30 years ago. Yeah. And basically, without knowing and being in that room, but we're basically taking an assumption that says, look, when this annexation agreement was negotiated, there was a relatively high amount of commercial anticipated at that time. And so if we were all sitting there negotiating, we would have wanted to exact a larger amount for the transportation, saying, hey, you're going to have a large traffic flow. You're going to have all these cars driving up and down, shopping at these shops that are going to be there. And the ratio of what was given, what the developer's credit, what the owner's credit was at the time, probably would have been less than or more than, depending upon how that played out. Fast forward almost 30 years, and what you have now is a rezone approved by the council that says, instead of that dense commercial that we anticipated, it's now a lower impact residential. So for us, the thought process was for us to come back and say, you also need to pay the new impact fee on transportation when we've already, in essence, exacted a higher amount than we probably would have had we known at the time that it was going to be this lower residential. Somewhat seemed like double dipping in an unfair scenario. That's the unique one in this circumstance for the council to debate is, does that resonate for you or does it not? And if you feel like it's appropriate, then you say yes to it, and if not, you say no. In a normal world, what we would be looking at would be more what is the public benefit over the developer's benefit for it. And you're going to see those come forward because Littleton Village will be asking, we're in negotiations with Littleton Village, and that one's much cleaner in the sense of what is the public benefit in the here and the now and today, not trying to look back 30 years and into that crystal ball to what the thought process was. Does that many more words than you were looking for?
Well, yeah, 5 minutes ago you had me.
I figured.
Thank you.
I know you well.
Any additional questions?
Yep, I do have one. If we don't know what the commercial that's going to actually wind up being built, how do we tie that into this?
So we amended to say that we just subtracted out the transportation impact fee component from so it's $1.87 or something like that per square foot for the residential. I'm sorry, for commercial. So what we did was subtract out the percentage that was transportation related and said whatever amount of square footage is built, it'll be multiplied by this lower number since we don't know exactly what that square footage is.
So will we get something then when that's built?
Oh, certainly, yeah. Yeah,
okay,
it'll
so
be
that gets...
Yeah, it'll just be minus the percentage that was transportation related.
Okay.
Any additional questions?
And I would just remind council, all of these payments are due now per the ordinance at time of building permit.
And then I have another amendment.
Councilmember Cole?
So I would like to reduce, to subtract the $25,000 reimbursement for the monument sign.
No second. Okay. Back to the main motion. And again, this is the motion for the final subdivision plat and the subdivision improvement agreement for the Meadows at Platte Valley final subdivision.
The vote is 6 in favor with Councilmember Valdez voting no. The motion carries.
Thank you, Council. General business added item 8B is for the video recording of the Charter Review Committee. Councilmember Cole.
I was making a note here. I would like to request that for the remaining meetings of the Charter Review Committee that we have those televised. I think this, so you want to hear the reason and then maybe we have a motion or not? Or do you want a motion first?
You can discuss it first if you want.
Okay. I think this is a really important committee, and there is I'm hearing mixed things about what's going on. I assume maybe some other people are too, and I think it would be good to have it for the record so that people can see and hear for themselves live or after the fact. So that's my reasoning.
Okay. Other comments?
I haven't heard anything one way or another, although I agree that this is something that is very important, and it would be good to have the citizens be able to watch this in play. When is this coming before council?
It has to be before you, I believe, in April. We anticipate being done. I mean, our hope is just a few more meetings. They've really crunched through the two big ones. Well, then tomorrow, assuming we have a meeting, will be the clerk posting, publishing, and we've been through the financial, which are the big chunks. So it may be much sooner, but it has to be to you by April.
And I think the meeting is important enough where it would be good for people to watch. And I'm assuming if it was filmed, it would also be replay so people could, watch it at their convenience. But I would support you on that, Peggy, that we do need to have this televised. There's other meetings that should be televised too, but definitely this one should be, each meeting should be televised and held here at the City Hall.
Councilmember Stein?
You have a question of staff. We all received this afternoon the minutes of all the various meetings, which I felt was very complete. So that would seem to me to summarize to a great extent the meetings that would have occurred. I'm wondering what is the economic impact of filming these meetings above and beyond having someone just take written minutes?
Probably not significant.
Okay.
Councilmember Stallman?
I'm sorry. There may be a question of scheduling and whether that works, but the financial is not an issue.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to respectfully disagree with Council Members Cole and Valdez. We didn't give fair warning on this to the participants up front. There was no indication to folks when we asked them to participate that we'd be televising. This is a commission deliberation. They're going to present their findings to us. We will have public debate and comment on any and all of it. I'm not particularly excited about changing horses in the middle of the stream on this one.
Other comments? Councilmember Brinkman?
I'll agree with what Councilmember Stallman just said. That's where my comments would go to. I think that this is a ad hoc community group that we put together, and we typically don't televise those. We did not talk to them about that prior, and they're close to wrapping. And I think that, again, they are bringing recommendation back to us, and so it is their recommendations that we will fully vet publicly and have public hearing on. So, and that will all be, of course, televised and documented. So I'm opposing this also.
Yeah. I'm going to step out and make a comment on this, and that my understanding is the committee itself has made room to allow for both majority and minority reports. It's not looked at a tremendous consensus approach, so it's not a deliberation in reaching a consensus. It's allowing for those discussions, and so there'll be opportunities for both sides of the arguments to come before council, and there will be an opportunity for public hearing and actually additional processes after that if we do get to the point of taking forward any kind of changes to the charter. So.
Mayor, if I, a couple other comments. I think in the resolution, you're correct, by the way, on the minority and majority. And in the resolution that the council adopted in creating this, there is specific language that states not to create specific language, but to create policy recommendations to the council. Now, the reality of what you will see probably in the next update are there, and right now we'll see what the committee, how they like it, but we've kind of taken it into the kind of technical or outdated piece where there is like specific language, change the word city treasurer to finance director, because that's what the current title is, kind of the administrative cleanup stuff, and then they've identified those that are philosophical questions for the city council, and that's really what's going to be coming to you, not in a specific, here's what the charter language amendment should be. As I think was commented, that will be up to you as you work through the public process of this. And then secondarily, there's several members who are asking to ensure that we have the kind of the background of the thought process that's in there, even in the situation where it's just a general recommendation of, hey, council, we want you to look at this specific section and figure out which way you want to go in this arena.
Any additional discussion? Okay. We'll move on to comments and reports. City Manager.
You want to vote?
Do you want to vote? Do you want to vote?
Did we have a motion?
Yeah.
Were you making a motion?
I didn't think I had a motion.
We didn't have a motion.
I thought you did.
And,
You said you wanted discussion on it, and unless you make a
well,
motion.
yeah, so
there
I
isn't
will,
one.
I will move that we video, just so we have a record of it.
I'll second it.
Okay.
I'd like to have more discussion.
Okay.
Just additional discussion. You know, when I interviewed people to be on that committee, I know that we did not discuss it being videotaped. And I think that's part of where council has to have follow through, because we did make a commitment to each of the people that we put on there, and I think that was the discussion, that they did not anticipate it being videotaped, so I think that's a significance. The other issue is we've got it being videotaped anyway, though, by a citizen, and I'm not comfortable with that either, because I think that's asking a citizen, and we didn't ask, but the citizen's in a position where they're doing something that the city ought to be doing if it's significant, and then who keeps that tape that the citizen's doing? It's the citizen's property. And I think that's problematic, too, in this digital world, because I'm not casting any aspersions to the citizen, but, you know, tapes can be altered and things can be changed, et cetera. If it's in the city's domain, then it becomes protected, I think, as far as the city document goes, and it's kept according to what the state archivist requires and that kind of validity. So we're really entering into an area here that extends beyond that discussion. I'm not comfortable with changing the horse in the middle of the stream with this committee, but I do think it opens up the door for perhaps wider consideration for videotaping meetings. And the reason why we've limited it has been a technological argument that the room next door and this room here are the ones that are set up for it, but the reality is that with portable equipment, it could be any meeting space. So I think where I'm going with this is I want to expand consideration of taping meetings and have that discussion with council. I'm not comfortable with changing the horse in the middle on the stream on this, because that was the commitment that was made, and we have to stay with that. And the minority and majority reports, the reports back to us, and the fact it's not specific wording, it's policy-oriented, I think provides adequate consideration for what's going on at that meeting, and I think that was what we said when we started it. If we'd wanted something different, we should have said it then.
Councilmember Stein.
Yeah, I don't want to be overly redundant, but I agree with Mayor Pro Tem Beckman. When we signed up here as council members. I think it was with the assumption that we were going to be on TV, but I don't think that these folks had the theory that they were going to do that, so I'll cut it there. Maybe not for the subject of this hearing, but I would like to hear more about this other videotaping. That's the first I've heard about it.
So noted.
So I would make one other comment, though. They are public meetings, and that's really important. When we ask people to serve on that, I don't know that we said to them they would be public meetings, that anybody could go and watch their deliberations. So I think that is also something to consider for the future. I'm still going to support this because these people are all sharp people. Many of them have been videoed bunches of times, but I understand some of the objections. So.
Council ready to vote? Say it every time.
The motion is what?
The motion is to video record the Charter Review Committee sessions.
The vote is 1 in favor, Councilmember Cole, and the remainder voting no. The motion fails.
Thank you. Moving into comments and reports, City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. The only thing I wanted to update council on, in case you are not all aware, is next Monday we are going to be having our fire chief interviews. We have 5 different panels and approximately 45 folks who will be participating, similar to Councilmember Cole participating in the police chief interviews. I have Councilman Stallman who's going to join me on the citizens panel. We have a citizens panel, a partners and neighboring chiefs panel, a administrative division chief panel, a staff panel, and a department head panel. So it should be, they'll be running the gauntlet. So we will, but the goal is to have a top finalist by 5 p.m. Next Monday. So I'll update council as we move through that process.
How many are left in the process? Because a couple have taken jobs elsewhere.
Just one, and so we had 8 applicants, and now we have 7 applicants.
Thank you.
So we have 1 internal and 6. I'm sorry, 6. There are 6 applicants, 5 external and 1 internal. So we'll update you. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Cole.
Oops, quick. I have a request, if it's okay to have Charlie Bloston, Public Works Director, give us a 1 or 2 minute update on the project on Stern Parkway and Lake. There's an awful lot of people eager for that project to be complete. So if he could give us, for the benefit of those who are interested in, out there listening or watching.
Council, we have a project along Stern Parkway from Windermere Street on the south and east to Lake Avenue on the north, right up by Stern Park. Excuse me. If you've driven in that area, you'll notice the Lake Avenue is closed right at Stern Parkway, and the reason is they're installing a large drainage culvert at that location. This is a project that is slightly under $1 million, shared equally between the city and the Urban Drainage and Flood Control District. The city went to bid a number of months ago and selected a contractor on the low bid. I'll tell you that the second low bid was $220,000 more than the one we selected. The contractor has been very slow. He's easily a month behind work, maybe 2 months. However, the good news is that everything that this contractor does is high quality. It's being done exactly according to the plans and specifications that have been submitted and approved. So the project will be done. It'll be late, and with weather coming in, it could be easily into January before most of the work is complete. There is a number of drainage culverts being installed from Windermere to Lake Avenue. Those culverts are very difficult, and in defense of the contractor and his lateness, some of the delay is caused by utility companies not really knowing what they have in the ground and where they're located. As a result, there is a lot of confusion with Xcel Energy, some very old water lines and sewer lines that date back probably before the 20s and 30s. As a result, it is a little confusing out there. We have been in touch with all of the neighbors that regularly contact us. We have more sidewalk superintendents on this job than you could ever imagine, including some former city employees. We are working carefully with them to let them know exactly what is going on and keeping them appraised as best we possibly can. Again, the contractor is slow but very deliberate and very good at what they're doing. Unfortunately, their scheduling is a little behind. I would suggest that if by chance we get some warm weather coming in after this cold spell, there's a possibility this project could see some conclusion sometime in January. Unfortunately, the final paving and landscape restoration probably will not occur until March or April. If you have any questions regarding that, I'll be glad to respond. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Blaston.
Thanks.
Been a big heads up, probably you all will give a big heads up for the holiday eve at the museum this Sunday night. You can get tickets at the museum, the library, and if the tickets aren't all sold before that night, you can get them there. And then what else? We heard about the Santa Claus shop, so anybody who's still watching the meeting, if you want to give money or toys or whatever to the Santa Claus shop, that's greatly welcome. Thank you.
Councilmember Stallman.
There's an old engineering adage, which, Charlie, I'm sure you're familiar with, others might be as well, that you can have two of the following three, good, fast, or cheap, but you can't have all three. Yeah, Paul, you probably heard it too. There you go. On November 25th, which was right before Thanksgiving, there was a meeting held amongst the fire partners and the representative from ESCI, which is a group that's been selected to do the standards of cover study. And in that meeting, the partners, including board members from Littleton Fire Protection District, Highlands Ranch, Metro District, and of course the city, shared their concerns with the representative that were born out of the Englewood study. The intent of the meeting was to make sure that there was crystal clear alignment on the scope of work for this particular study, which was included in the 2014 budget. And without getting into gruesome details, the partners did not hold back in terms of sharing what their expectations were, including myself and City Manager Penny and the other folks that were on the call. The result of that was a draft scope of work that came back, a revised draft scope of work, and ultimately council is going to get this for review once all the input is compiled from all the partners. But the high-level component pieces of this will be tasks associated with project initiation, evaluation of current conditions for Littleton Fire Rescue as it pertains to the entire service area, future system demand projections, future delivery system models, development, review, and delivery of a master plan report, potentially an organizational strategic plan, and ultimately development of the standards of cover document itself. Major components of this are going to be discussions of what is executable, what the partners, obviously including the city and council as a policy director, directing policy along with the other partner boards, want to have accomplished relative to what can be accomplished with ranges presumably of, if you do a little bit more, what's the incremental cost? If you do a little bit less, what's the impact to quality of service? So way more detail in this, but I believe it's coming to council, city manager, in early January, potentially?
Correct.
Okay. And I'll talk to you about schedules because I'm going to be out of the country for the 7th, so I don't want to hold this up, but Just FYI, we can talk offline. So that's all I've got.
With the draft scope coming in January, is there, recognizing that the scope may determine the time frame, but is there a general idea of a time frame that folks would want to target?
That's a question that came up in terms of approving the scope or in terms of completing the project.
Completing the project, just kind of.
That's a question.
And I do not recall off the top of my head. I can let you guys know. I do know that because this was a significant change in scope than what we had originally put out, and the response was that it could still be done within that same time period, but I do not recall what that is off the top of my head. So I'll let you guys know.
And the original scope, I think, was much more of a canned standard of coverage project, and follow on from Englewood, everybody was. There was broad general agreement that wasn't what we needed. What we needed was something more specific to our situation. That
is an understatement, yes.
Yeah.
Actually be useful.
Well, among other things.
So can I ask, so is that going to come to a regular meeting or to a study session first?
It'll come to a regular meeting just on consent for approving the scope.
Okay.
And primarily because the partners wanted to be party to that agreement, so.
Councilmember Valdez.
Yes, thank you. My kudos go out to all the merchants and Charlie and staff for the wonderful job that they did for the parade of lights the other night with Santa Claus coming down the street. It was a lot of fun. Streets were absolutely packed. Again, Charlie, good job. I think every light came on that you would hope would come on. So congratulations again to the merchants and Charlie and staff. Good job.
Good time was had. Councilmember Rankin.
Just to share, the Colorado Municipal League Board of Directors asked that Sam Mamet, the director of the Municipal League, send a letter to CDOT, and in particular Don Hunt, based on the incredible work that CDOT did repairing all those roads that were damaged in the flood. The governor had issued a challenge to get all the highways repaired by December 1st, which was just under 2 months, and they were all open before Thanksgiving. So on behalf of the board, which then actually translates to on behalf of all the members of CML, we sent a letter off to Don. It was very well done, very well written. I'll have a copy of it sent to the city manager for disbursement to the city council.
Thank you. Councilmember Stein.
Well, again, to be redundant, I have to echo Councilmember Valdez's comments. This is the first year in 20 years that I've had the opportunity to be in town for Thanksgiving, and of course, I took the opportunity to go down to the candlelight walk, and it was absolutely mind-boggling. It was fantastic, and thank you very much, and congratulations to all the city staff and the volunteers that were involved.
Yeah. And one last comment on the candlelight walk. Congratulations to Wyatt, the 5-year-old whose name was drawn to light the tree. So.
And I said parade of lights. It was pretty. Yeah, candlelight. Yeah.
Mayor Pro Tem Beckman.
Thank you.
Just one item that wasn't mentioned by anyone else. It's because I'm on the C470 Corridor Coalition. This is a group of folks who have jurisdictions that border C470, and what they're working with is the concept of the express lane addition on C470. And the overwhelming issue has been lack of funds, lots of planning, lack of funds. But amazingly, there is a fund availability that has come through the state based on their RAMP program, which is the Responsible Acceleration of Maintenance and Partnerships. And what that is basically is the director of CDOT, rather than putting money aside for long-range projects, is pulling that money back and putting it in projects that could be done now. And one of them includes C470 express lanes. So with that addition of money to the planning that was already done, there's a very good possibility that between now and January 2018, there will be an express lane, toll express lane, westbound on C470 from I-25 to Wadsworth, and eastbound from I-25 to Platte Canyon. And this is still in the works. This is the amount of the work is the amount of the money. And if there was more money, there would be more that would be done. But at this point, this looks like it's something that's going to happen.
Thank you. Just a reminder to council of a few dates. It is December, and we have a number of meetings that we will not be having, but those we will be having is we have a study session next Tuesday. For those that are participating in the economic forecast breakfast, that's the morning of the 13th, which is Friday, and our council workshop will be the evening of December 16th. So reminders on those. Yep.
Phil, the study session date, is that a 6 o'clock or a 7 o'clock start time?
7.
That's next Tuesday.
That's next Tuesday.
For the 16th or next week?
Well, let's go next week, whatever that
6.
date is. I'm sorry.
6. 6 o'clock on 6 o'clock on the 10th, and we will be reviewing our start times on the 16th.
Thank you.
At 7 o'clock.
At 7 o'clock.
Start time.
Yes.
Can you send a memo out with that, because we'll never get it right?
Coach, can you slow down?
Okay. And with that, belated welcome to Councilmember Stein joining the big table up here. And thank you to citizens that have gutted it out. And thank you to staff for being present. Have a great evening. We're adjourned.